welcome back to an unexpected art lesson. This week we are going to continue talking about getting into drawing. So, Watson, what are the basic things that I need that I can get on a budget to start drawing? I'm asking this like I don't already have them, but this is for other listeners who we have inspired over the past however many episodes it's been to give drawing a try. What are they looking for?
To start things off, you need kind of a basic kit. So first thing would be some pencils, obviously. The ones I would recommend to start with would be a 2B and an HB pencil. The 2B is primarily made of a softer graphite, which means that you can get a much bolder line out of it. And HB, which is the proverbial middle-of-the-road pencil, that is great for kind of light sketching and construction.
Also, if you aren't sure how to tell if a pencil's one or the other, it'll typically say, especially on the wooden pencils, on the pencil itself. Listeners, you can't see this, I'm currently holding up a pencil that is HB, which I didn't know that was a significant thing until you mentioned it. I was like, what is this pencil? Oh, it's HB. Neat.
Your selection of pencil, you don't need to worry about the full range because there is an entire line of both B, H, and H pencils. H, of course, is more of the harder type of pencil, which means that the graphite is more compact, which means you get a lighter line no matter how hard you push, but that's not really relevant for y'all at this point. Next up is the kneaded eraser. It is not only a great source of stress relief because you can shape it into random things, but it can be molded into literally any shape, which is great for doing simple corrections and cleaning up any smudges or whatnot from your sketch.
Where do you find one of those?
Any art supply store such as Michael's, possibly Walmart if you have a decent art section. That one I don't believe you'd find at a dollar store.
Yeah, gotcha. A possible alternative if you are trying to make very fine corrections is the eraser cap thingies that you can put on pencils, where you put it on the back and it's kind of like a little house-shaped thing. Those can be useful, at least for a short period of time, for erasing very specific or cleaning up very specific spots on the paper because they are pointy.
Yeah, that would most definitely work as well. If you have a vinyl eraser as well, that would be another optimal item to add to your kit. It's used for doing more harder corrections, so this does actually rub more of the graphite off the paper. But to start, a kneaded eraser is perfect.
Yeah, all I've got is just the regular pink erasers. That's all I got, but it gets the job done.
Oh yeah. Vinyl erasers are something that more would be a tool that you would use once you get more comfortable with things. And of course, next up is the tried, the tested, the true, your sketchbook. Obviously, printer paper can work fine here, but the idea is that you have a place where you can kind of have a compilation of all your work. So a bound book is something that not only lets you see your progress, but it gives you a way to regularly practice as well.
Yes, because if you're like me, then once you start doing a thing in the book, you have to keep doing the thing in that book because you can't leave that book empty once you've started using it. That also translates to you cannot start using that book until you know exactly what you're going to be using it for that will fill it all up, which is the neurodivergent brain. But having something that you can complete and also look back on is pretty neat, as we discussed earlier when I went on my nostalgia trip looking at 6th grade me's artwork, which had some stuff that was surprisingly good, considering I was in 6th grade.
I have absolutely nothing that would have remained from 6th grade with me, so I am impressed.
You're old, so,
Yeah, back then, of course, there was the entire witch burning thing, too, so it was an awkward time all around.
You're old and you're forgetful, it's fine.
Wait, what was I laughing at again?
I don't know. Continuing, we were talking about sketchbooks.
Okay, yes. So any sketchbook that is a bound book that does actually give you the idea to regularly practice, If you have the chance to find something more specific, any non-lined book that has either a soft or a hard tooth would be the best for retaining pencil marks. Most sketchbooks nowadays do have a kind of a tips or tools recommended on the front of the book or in the back, saying what would be best. Look for anything that does encourage pencil or graphite, or obviously ink if once you get to that point.
When you say hard tooth in reference to sketchbooks, what does that mean?
What a hard tooth means is if you look very closely at any type of paper that is used for drawing or sketching, if you look closely at it or at an angle, you'll see very subtle ridging on it. Or even if you run your fingers across it, it'll feel like there's a texture to it.
I never noticed that before. As I am just casually feeling up my sketchbook.
I will resist the urge to say phrasing here.
You've said worse. I can get away with this.
Fair enough. But the key thing is that tooth is what will help graphite remain on the page. If it is something that you would like to keep for archival purposes, a lot of paper will also mention that if it is archival quality. Usually what this means is the particular agents used to create the paper are designed to not degrade as quickly as other particular mediums.
Paper will still be a good quality when you're 30 as it was when you were 13. Or however old I was in 6th grade. I'm really bad at remembering ages and grades.
And then, of course, one of the other items that is good to have is a blending stump. You can find these at any art store. They literally look like rolls of paper shaped into a pencil. They're great for when you're using softer graphite, so that Lucky 2B pencil that we were talking about earlier. You can then use this blending stump to kind of smudge the graphite and extend where that mark is on the paper, and it gets this really neat gradient or shade attached to it that allows you to do more with a simple set of tools.
So a blending stump is basically a pencil made out of paper that extends an existing graphite line on the paper?
Correct.
Fascinating. That wasn't what my guess was, because I've seen people using pieces of paper and stuff to smudge and soften for shading in pencils. But also I might have, at one point when I was skimming through this, read it as bleeding stump, which is exhibit like 335, why I should not skim things and why I have to reread things. I read too fast and misread a lot. Blending makes so much more sense.
Yep, and this is not the be-all end-all for the best way to blend. This is one of the points where I would encourage the listeners to experiment. Like, there's a cloth called a chamois or chamois. Oh wow, there's a word I don't know how to pronounce.
Chamois?
Chamois, there we go. It does give you a little bit of a softer appeal than what a blending stump would give. The other item that I've experimented with is actually a makeup pad remover. It was sold at one of those little artisanal stores. I believe it is some type of cotton cloth that you can literally use as the same thing to blend. Again, it does give another way of seeing how your marks can be altered by using these other tools. You're not just constrained to using a pencil or a blending stump or even an eraser. Experiment with what kind of appeals to you.
I've seen people, they rip off some paper and just kind of fold it up so it has an edge. Using that, you could potentially maybe use your fingernail, or there's options.
Exactly, yeah. Fingernail is another great one because it is a hard edge that you can then use to make a very sharp smudge, as opposed to where the blending stump or any other items may make it a little bit softer. So, for example, things like Batman would be a great use of a sharper blend as opposed to a lighter thing such as a blending stump.
Exactly, and you could also make interesting effects by having a shape that you trace over. So on one side of the line, it will be softer, while on the other side of the line, it is like very sharp cutoff, potentially, depending on how much pressure you applied.
Precisely.
So why is it best to start with pencils, outside of the fact that the idea of starting drawing with a pen stresses me out?
Makes you feel any better? I don't know too many artists who've started with pen. Sometimes ballpoint sketches are a fun exercise, but I wouldn't recommend it if you're a perfectionist. So, reasons to start with pencils. 1. Immediate tactile feedback. When you use this, you feel the paper texture. You can get a better kind of association for that control. You can feel exactly how well the paper is taking the marks that you're making. It is one of the most forgiving mediums out of any art tools, or any art medium to get started with. Easy to erase, adjust, and it lets you see how your work is progressing.
Yeah, also it's an affordable option. You probably already have pencils that you can be using to draw. It's easily available. And there's sometimes it feels good to put pencil or sometimes even pen to paper and see things come to life. As I say sometimes when I'm talking to other writers, sometimes you just need to think some things out on paper.
When in doubt, go for the winged lizard ferret.
Always for the winged lizard ferret. Although if you do want to show off a little bit and use pen, but you want to maybe give yourself a little wiggle room for forgiveness to fix mistakes, there is a brand of pen that's it's a friction erasable gel pen, spelled Frixon. I tend to buy them whenever I see them because they write very, very well, and they erase pretty much completely.
Nice.
It's pretty great. So you could use that for a drawing. You might have to wait a second after you have put the line down for it to dry, and then you can erase it. But that way, if you want to show off a little bit, just be like, look, I did this in pen. I don't have to know it was erasable. But when in doubt, pencils are a good place to start.
Exactly. And the other perk of pencils is you don't need nearly as many to create things. Pencils give you the option for that variable line weight by changing pressure, by changing where the graphite touches the paper. You're using the point of the pencil, if you're using kind of the edge of the graphite. Each method gives you another way that you can make marks on that page.
Yeah, and when you're drawing or sketching with a dull pencil versus one that has been freshly sharpened, it's going to have a different appearance, a different look and weight to the lines, which you can also use to lean into the movement and depth of your drawing.
Precisely. And also working with the limited palette, as it were, of just graphite, this forces you to not only work with a simpler set of tools, it gets you to think more in value. So light and dark, rather than trying to work out color theory while you're just getting started. The scales of gray are easier.
Exactly, and also learning the value of leaving some spaces blank versus filling it in with pencil. I remember seeing somewhere, and this could be incorrect, but it had to do with Dragon Ball. When the hair goes yellow when they go Super Saiyan, that might have originally started because the artist got tired of coloring in the hair on every page.
That would make sense as somebody who has had to do that for multiple characters.
So it has an impact and can add a level to the story you're telling with the art, whether you mean it to or not. And then you just kind of roll with it.
And, of course, one other perk of starting with pencils, much like that $5 pizza joint near you, it's both cheap and portable. You can draw anywhere, anytime.
Exactly. And you go on a trip? Oh no, I forgot my pencil? You can get them just about anywhere. So then you get a pencil, you can get your cheap sketchbook, and then just do some fun drawing on your vacation. I say as someone who forgot to take a sketchbook on her most recent vacation, but ended up too busy to do any drawing. Which is unfortunate, because I could have made time to do drawing. But this week, I'm going to make time to do drawing. Our listeners will not be hearing this episode for a little bit, but I'm going to make time to do drawing.
That is always one of the first lessons of learning to draw, is always try to put that set schedule in place.
Something about having external accountability and having someone else expecting me to do something helps a lot. Sometimes I need a little bit more than that to get me motivated, like with social media marketing stuff. But I also currently have a deal with a friend where we are being accountability buddies and rewarding each other in dog pictures.
A valid approach.
Community is important, especially when you kicking your own butt is not enough to get you in gear. That's when you just find a friend to bribe you with something.
Yeah, sometimes you do need that external reminder. Would be it either a set exercises for the day of what you plan to draw, or a series of reference pictures that you work off of, or even just pick a random artist and see what makes their stuff work for you, and then attempt to draw it yourself.
Yeah. Just find the approach with your brain and go with it. Speaking of approaches, learning how to do things, you have it out here about pencil pressure scale exercise. So what does that mean?
This also is a way to prove that you do not need to spend hours each day honing a craft. Obviously, the more time you spend, the better you get, but even just 15 minutes, you can do a lot with that bit of time. So this little exercise is a great way of actually learning pencil control. Obviously, if you draw heavy, it helps encourage you to make sure you can draw light. You draw light, draw heavy, etc., etc. First thing you do, though, is use either an HB or whatever pencil that you want to start with your kind of range of line weights. And the first step of it is a feather touch. So barely let that pencil graze the paper. Aim for lines so light you can barely see them.
Okay. Just do a very faint sketch, so it looks like an idea of what you're trying to draw on the paper, but it doesn't look like it's been fully drawn on the paper, but you can see the idea.
Exactly. This particular technique becomes more useful later on, because this is how you can put together a pre-sketch for something. Those nice light lines that you put on the paper will help you build up the figure when you get to that point in whatever you're trying to create.
It's kind of like when you're testing out what you think it's going to look like. You have to think it out on paper before you start making the drawing.
Precisely. Once you get comfortable with this particular line weight, you move on to the next one, which is sketch weight. This, to most people, would be kind of what you normally would write with. You are one of those people that when you turn your page over after writing and you see a whole bunch of pen marks, you're probably a little heavy, but tomato, tomato.
A little heavy-handed, yeah.
Exactly. This would be kind of your standard construction line weight. So once you get that light figure sketched out, this is the next step to kind of refine the pose, refine any details that you want to add, things like that.
Once you figure it out, this is when you start actually sketching out the shape and the picture you're creating.
Once you get comfortable with the idea of sketch weight, then you're going to actually start making more confident lines. So this is when you're actually pressing down firmly, but make sure you don't break the lead, especially if it's a B lead, as it's a bit softer, and obviously the more pressure you put, the easier it can break. But think of this kind of like that final outline weight. So when you're looking at stuff like shading lines or
any sort of cartoon or comic artist where you see they have the lines that shape what the character looks like, shapes their eyes, their ears, their mouth. Sometimes they'll even shape their hair, whereas some of the more sketch weight or featherweight lines might be like adding the texture to the hair, or like little wrinkles near the eyes from where people smile.
Precisely. Once you're happy with, well, actually, I guess we can make this joke here. Once you're confident with your confident lines, you can then move on to your bold statement lines. So these are going to be like those dark shadows that you'd see in things like Sin City, or anything that you would see in like a Batman comic. This is where you're putting more pressure on the line. It gives you much more dramatic shadows and a much thicker outline because more of that graphite is hitting the paper.
So this is like you've drawn a picture of someone standing. The bold statements line would be the way the shadow that they cast on the ground, or if there's something behind them. Or if you want to exaggerate, maybe they have a scar, or they've got real bad bags under their eyes, or something like that. That's where you lean into more of the bold statement lines. Though perhaps with scars, that would be delineated by what color you use, or what combination of the lighter weight of lines that you use. I mean, depending on the level of scarring, what style you're going for, depends on whether you would use the lighter style or bold statement.
Yeah. Experiment with what works for you. If bold statement lines kind of help set that piece for you, bold works. If featherweight, this is the part where you get to experiment with what you think works.
Yeah, and what works for one piece may not work for another piece. It also ties into what kind of story you're trying to tell, what things you want the viewer to notice first, what you're trying to draw their attention to, what just feels right for the piece that you're making. Just a note to tack onto the talk about drawing scarring and injuries. Be mindful about how you handle that in your art, because that can be kind of sensitive for some people who have scars and have suffered injuries like that. Just when in doubt, be sensitive, be considerate, don't be a jerk.
Wise words. With these exercises, the idea is that you practice to make a single line that can start feather light, gradually increasing to bold, and fades back to that featherweight drawing. This control becomes a foundational piece for expressive drawing and gestural.
It also helps you learn muscle memory of what it feels like, how much pressure it takes for you to draw the different weights. You get this sort of tactile experience, and then you are more easily able to put the correct amount of weight the first time for what you're trying to draw.
Exactly.
Also, you would probably end up at some point with a page that is just covered with lines that decrease and increase in weight, and then you can do fun doodles or fill it with colors if you're bored.
Yeah, a lot of my initial drawing exercises each day are just like circles or random shapes with varying line weight. And then next day, if I get really bored, I'll add random eyes to those shapes and see what weird creatures come out of it.
I mean, that's the way to do it. So there was one time when I was in high school, I took AP statistics, and when I was taking the AP test for that, which I was still floored that I actually passed that because I struggled in that class, but on one of the pages I could see like the outline of where there had been a curve drawn on the other side of the paper, so I turned that into a camel. I was not able to take a picture of it because it was from an AP test and I no longer have proof of it. I remember being very proud of my little camel. That's also what happens when you're a very fast test taker and not allowed to leave the room or have a book or something, is doodles that you never get to see again.
Yeah, I was advised I wasn't allowed to have a smart aleck cartoon ferret making commentary on the test if I finish early.
That is not surprising. But hey, you're an adult now. You're not in school now. You can make like a whole little comic strip of your smart aleck ferret making commentary on whatever you want it to make commentary on.
And that's when the destruction began.
I'm actually surprised you haven't started doing that already. It's a good thing you're pretty.
Yeah.
Thank Thank you for listening to An Unexpected Art Lesson, the show where we talk about everything you didn't know about art. Stay tuned next week for further discussion of the truth about drawing and how to get started on your journey as an artist. If you like what we're doing, you can follow us on social media and join the conversation over at An Unexpected Art Lesson on Threads, Blue Sky, and Substack. And you can also support us over on Patreon. Get early access to episodes and other fun things at patreon.com/anunexpectedartlesson.